And I want to say hello and welcome to all of you. And we are super happy that so many people were curious to come here and to listen to the presentation of the work by Raumlabor, and also to share the question with us. We're very happy that all of you are here. My name is Sara Melin, and I work with the team of the Gothenburg Dans Teater Festival. And my colleagues are here too. We have Birgitta Lindberg, our artistic director. Somewhere in the room I have Karin Hjertstrand, who is managing the seminar program and coordinating the seminar program, who has been working very hard for the last 2 days. And we have Hanna Johansson, who is working with the communication of the festival. And we also have Anna Efraimsson here, who is curating our seminar program, Playing for Change, which will be the theme of the seminar program in May 2014. The festival runs the 14th until the 21st of May 2014. And we present performing arts, dance and theater and performing arts, everything in between. And I also want to say thank you to Frilagret, which runs the space that we are in right now. This is a space for youth culture and young art initiated by youth and young adults. And we're very happy to be here. The festival office that we work in is just above this space. And we are collaborating more and more with Frilagret, which we're very excited with. You might ask why a festival of performing art invites an architectural group from Berlin to come and develop the questions with us. We've been working with this festival, or the festival was established 20 years ago, and to be honest, we're still in search of space. It might be obvious that a festival that's been running for so many years has its obvious spaces or its obvious place in the city, but this is not the case. And I think it's both positive and negative. We're always working in between, in the space in between the established venues of the theaters, as well as we collaborate with the theater venues. And I think that's really the core of a festival, that we can create this temporary space and inflate it and be part of something that is just here and now. But we also want to explore how that temporary space can be an active part in the development of the city, in the development of this city. So last year in September, myself and Birgitta visited a festival called Steirische Herbst in Graz in Austria, and there we met the work by raumlaborberlin. You had constructed a festival center of reused furniture and reused building material, old washing machines and old windows, and made a festival parlor. And for us it was an interesting way of marking out a space in the city, and also to mark out the festival. So there and then we decided that we wanted to explore your work, and that we also wanted to explore Gothenburg and our role as a festival together. So here we are. Jan Liesang from Raumlabor and Samuel Carvalho have been walking the city for 2 days now, and we will listen to you about your projects, and also hopefully get the view of Gothenburg. And our aim of this visit is to guide us to find the next space for May 14, but also to mark out our role. And I will hand over the word to Björn Ehrenmark, who is an architect and journalist, and who also run a project called Arkitektens Grannar, who will moderate the talk later.
Thank you, Sara. My name is Björn, and I'll shortly hand over to Jan and Samuel. I would like to start by saying to Sara and to the festival that it's really inspiring as an architect to see this initiative, a performance arts project inviting Raumlabor, inviting you all, inviting me to discuss matters of architecture, matters of space, and actions in space. Some of the questions you just raised about how a festival can act and activate a city, or even start transformations of a city, are questions that I hope we come back to later. The evening will unfold as follows. I'll hand over the word to Jan and Samuel. They will present some of their work, some of their thoughts about Gothenburg, some of their things that they've seen during these 2 days of sort of scouting locations in the proximity. We'll then cut for a short break where you can get something to drink or something to eat, and also discuss amongst yourself some of the questions raised. We'll then invite you back to a more informal discussion amongst each other about these questions and how they can be brought forward. For those of you who never heard of Raumlabor or didn't participate in the event this summer when they were here presenting some other projects, they're a collective of architects from Berlin. So there's more of them than Jan and Samuel. They're here representing the collective. Berlin, a city that maybe can be described as a never-ending festival in itself. If you want to be look at it through those kinds of eyes. Please take the stage, Jan and Samuel, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Björn, and also Sarah for this introduction, and thank you very much all of you to come here and to share this maybe more question than answers with us. And I think that's quite nice that we don't come here with a project. We don't know what we're going to do. We hope we can do something for this festival to make it maybe more visible in the city, or to raise certain questions also with the outfit or the architecture of the festival, or to maybe make a performance. I think this is still open, and what we hope to learn from you is just get some reaction of what, when we show you some other projects, how this feels in connection to Gothenburg, and maybe which is especially interesting for you, or which you think could be challenging for some urban spaces which we might not know. I mean, we have been traveling around in the last 2 days quite a bit, but still I think we have a total outsider, touristy kind of view on Gothenburg, and yeah, so we hope to learn a lot, and we hope to give you a little bit of an insight in our work. Yeah, just to give you a short, this is part of our team. We are 8 architects, like partners, having founded Raumlabor in 1999. And Sam is one of our people who work for us now for 2.5 years. And so I also brought him because he's maybe the more creative than I am, and also because he's probably going to continue working on the project. So I wanted that he also is part of this presentation, and he's also going to help me doing this presentation. Yeah. I just changed the name an hour ago of the lecture. It was first placemaking, and then I saw that play, because we discussed a lot about this name of play, which has been employed a lot in different festivals, different discussions, and we also saw it in the biennial advertisements, and so it's a bit of a difficult maybe to use still this label of play, but while we were talking about it, I found it again interesting. So I think for today we keep trying to also find out about this, if this is still critical or still raising some question, or is this still something we want to go on, or we want to find some other maybe label or narrative which fits to that work we're going to do together. And yeah, coming from Berlin, as you just said, I mean, there's a lot of playground. There's a lot of, or there has been after the wall came down, there's been all this empty plots and all this uncertainty about what is legal, what is illegal. So we just, as students, just occupy an attic, have a club, we just do bars in public space, and this is still going on, this kind of culture, even so there's less open space and maybe more restrictions. And we kept asking ourselves, what is this? I mean, what can be play? Is this kind of playing, being political? Is this also, I mean, it's also out of this system of economy of that everything has to have a use, everything has to be paid, every time has to be paid. I mean, also this kind of gathering, being political, being also you coming here tonight, I think is somehow play in opposite to what we consider work or economy. And then if you put play and space together, or the city, I think it's very uncertain what is a good public space, and what kind of public space is going to be really appropriated and be really alive in the future. Even so the design is sometimes beautiful, we just feel like it's empty all the time. So it's something which goes through all our work, that this kind of search for space which is also inspiring. And here I hand over to, because we were discussing this thing of play and who's really playing the city, and I think since Sam is much younger than me, he is more into that scene, and he wanted to
yeah, we added this also some minutes ago, or half an hour ago, after these conversations about what is play and what interpretations you can have of it. And my personal interpretation has to do with these kind of characters, or these groups, these subcultures that exist in cities that use the city very intensely as a playground. But they do it just for sheer pleasure. They usually have no audience, it's anonymous, it's amateur, it's hobby. And this is just a very fast example. This is a group from Paris called UX. I met one of them in an exhibition, and they're like engineers, archaeologists, artists, and they explore tunnels in Paris, the underground tunnels, for many years now. And they have this kind of sort of vigilante feel to them, where they explore and they fix things. This is an example. They fixed the clock of the Pantheon. It took them 1 year, and they'd go there every weekend and slowly fix the clock, and then it started working, and then they just leave. So they have this kind of superhero underground feel to them. Yeah. And this is another example also that we thought of, it's a friend of mine in Berlin who does this. So again, these movements, these subcultures, dumpster diving is growing in Berlin. So this action where you go to supermarkets and collect food from dumpsters. And so many groups do this as a mix of need and passion and subversiveness. But she does it really nicely because when she does it every weekend, she gets home, she displays all the food and then takes a picture from above, and she does this every week. And you know, people follow her to see what she's collecting and how her trips went.
Yeah, from here I go a little bit into some insight of, or some thoughts about public space in general. And I think when we talk about public space today, we still very often have this kind of historical image in mind, that you go out in public space to be part of some kind of community, to go shopping, to meet people, to be some kind of part of some social interaction, so also to be political. But then in fact, when we look at our cities, our public spaces, very often they don't function this way. And when we look of how our lives are organized, it's also that very much we rush through public space, at least we as Berliners in many cases, and we only rest in more or less commercial places, which are cafes, most of the time, not in the summer maybe. And so this public space, I mean, in many cities is very much dominated by mass consumption. And so this aspect that the city is a social theater, this aspect that you behave differently when you're in the public than when you're at home, I think this is kind of very blurred. This idea of us as political human beings who like act in a certain way in the public, different from our privacy, I think this is just kind of disappeared, and this I think also raises a lot of questions. I mean, one example is that it became very important if the American, whoever runs for American presidency, what kind of dog he has, you know, like, and this I think is so absurd. Yeah, this kind of that everything becomes private, or like every private thing becomes public. Yeah, so this is, I think it's a very interesting issue for us. Well, like, once we want somehow the public space to be occupied and appreciated and appropriated by private initiatives, but in the same time I feel very much that there should be a difference between the public and the private. I think it's a very important kind of setting for a real democracy. And then there's more and more public spaces like shopping malls, which are not public in a pure sense. And I think we as architects, we always denied these spaces when they came up in the 80s, and we said, oh no, this is so ugly, this is all kind of seeming, and we don't want to be in touch with that. And we said, oh, this is not public space, and we don't deal with it. But I think more and more we have to accept that these spaces really are spaces where people go to cinemas, eat their pizzas, and fall in love. So we have to also kind of get a relation to that space and maybe try to make them different, or even to overcome this kind of privatization of public space in some way. This is also a question which I actually took from another conference I was attending in Tampere in Finland, where I also felt like it's a very cultural thing because I think we all have this ideal of the European city today. This is what city for us. I mean, modernism kind of failed in terms of public spaces, so we all go back to the city centers and enjoy this kind of cultural, educated, trading kind of life. But then still, I think how dense a city is, or how much we really want this interaction to become very close to us, is also very much a cultural indication, there's cultural differences. And when we were talking today about the public space in Gothenburg, I think we also already had some points where Hannah disagreed and said, oh no, this is not so big, this space. And so, oh, it's also open and big. So it's also something, I think, for an architect or urban planner to find out where this kind of perception of that space is. I think the biggest change within this public and private, and the biggest change in concern of public space and use of public space is really the virtualization of public life. That this is in wrong order. That we actually, whatever we want to do when we want to participate in some kind of political debate or so, we switch on the TV but not go out on the street. So this whole like idea that we have to go like the public space, it's actually the political space, in fact doesn't exist anymore. Only comes back into life when we start to get together and have demonstrations. And I think there was, especially in that so-called Eastern revolutions, there was this very new phenomena that this virtual public space really got together with the real public space, and that all these people suddenly meet at this one big square, but all the information went through Twitter and other kind of digital media. Yeah, we also were in the suburbs today and looked at the so-called modernist public space, where we feel like we've worked a lot on this space, and I also show one project which deals with this kind of spaces, and we feel that this is maybe the biggest kind of shortcoming of the whole modernist idea, that the more public space you put, and this idea that you put a beautiful landscape and then you put some beautiful objects into it, and then all the space in between would somehow be activated and appropriated by the people. I think this is really a very, it's really a kind of failure of modernism, that they didn't realize that public life is something which actually occurs in between, like on streets, in between shops, that it needs a program, that it needs also differences. That is also like that someone who's young is very different from someone who's old, and who wants very different spaces to be in. And I think this is also maybe a reason why in this kind of spaces there's normally a lot of vandalism, because there's so much of this one thing that you really feel like you want to destroy it. As I already talked before, this was in the wrong direction. So, yeah. Yeah, this is a funny example of where this kind of where it's a shop opening of in a shopping center in Berlin, and it was announced via the media that there would be some very good special offers, and then this became a riot somehow there, where suddenly, in a very strange way, a shopping center became this kind of not political but a riot place, just because they did kind of overdid their excitement announcements. Yeah, this is kind of questions that we connect to this lecture, but also is very much connected to, I think, all of our projects. And I don't know if we have answers, but like that we're really interested what does actually happen in the city, not only in the formal parts, but also what happens in this kind of underlayers in the suburbs. Like what do people actually do, and where do they interact, and what do they identify with, and where do they feel free, and where do they feel oppressed, and all these kind of questions. And then also the question of how can we initiate a dialogue, we as specialists, town planners, architects, about kind of that we have an imagination about our cities, that we just not only accept it the way it is and feel like, oh, this is what the politicians do, but that we get some kind of idea and that we can kind of raise some kind of creativity. And I think this is a very difficult part, because we normally talk in very different words, and so we developed a few techniques to make this, I think, possible, this dialogue, that everybody can enter. But I think it's always needs some work to be done. This is almost the space I was showing before in the of the parking lot. So it's a drawing we did where we thought, sometimes the worst spaces are the best for appropriation. Which have this kind of emptiness, and where suddenly there's also this possibility of difference to do something which is not what the concept of the city already has kind of inside its kind of marketing system. Yeah, so how can we create a city which is full of surprises? And we tried to make a little bit of an image of that kind of city for the Biennale some years ago, where we kind of tried to draw a city which looks like this. Everything is always under in a kind of transformation, and what we also believe democracy is that everything is always on the question, that it's not the fixed thing, but it's kind of a city of negotiation where spaces change and where sometimes this group occupies the space and sometimes the other, and at the same time it's a collection of about 70 of our projects. Yeah, now I go into, we have like 3 chapters of projects, and I think I go through them in different speeds, and if it becomes too fast or if you have questions, you can also always interrupt. I mean, I think we could easily, just because we're not so many, discuss things which are directly related within the kind of lecture, and then later we can discuss more about Gothenburg and how we apply it. So one group is mobile urban activators, and these are tools that we've created for many different places now, and they're normally tools to create some kind of temporary community or to help some kind of initiative to do some public discussions or do some public events in places where there is no shelter or there is like awkward conditions or in the winter or so on and so forth. And maybe the first like mobile structure of this kind we did is called the Kitchen Monument, and we created that to have dinners, like common dinners, in a festival which was about what to believe in, was the theme of the festival. So we wanted to create a very intimate space, but in public space, where we always invited to, well, there's questions, yeah. I just always put them in randomly. It's this inflatable structure. And the idea was to bring in like two different parties from the neighborhood. In the first case, it was the owner of a kiosk and a journalist who was very regional in this neighborhood, and they were asked to do a dinner together and invite their friends and also invite the audience of that festival and cook together with the audience. So, and we saw with all this kind of cooking, there is the possibility that you come to a point where you might start to discuss these kind of intimate things which you normally wouldn't do in such a public space. And the spaces were also chosen by us, and they were two very different spaces, but all spaces which had certain qualities, but were never kind of used for gatherings or dinners. And so this, since it was in the winter, or it was in April actually, which is still a bit winter, and we needed some kind of shelter, which led us to this kind of inflatable structure, just on impressions. It was also nice at this place because there were about 20,000 cars passing by, and it was there for one day, and then we always took it away after this one day. So it also had this kind of miracle effect that next day people would pass by and say, ah, was that really there, or was it just another one of these structures where we also used some drawing was created in New York, and it was actually it was a gallery called Storefront, and it was really just what we did, we made kind of a network with different initiatives who were already there because we're not active in New York in this kind of urban, and they all had different agendas, things they wanted to put forward in public space. Some were like doing music, and so we just gave them this tool, and then they hosted these different activities for 1 week going across. It's a very abstract map, I can't read it myself, but it's somewhere in Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens. So it's the same strategy. This time it's a van, it's a bit more convenient. And then it has this inflatable structure. This is like that. This is under the Brooklyn Bridge. say. It was great.
But the events changed from dinners to talks to concerts, rap battles. So there was, this is the question. Every night there was a different event. Yeah.
Yeah. I was not there.
Ah.
No, but there were very different places, very different events, and also went from this kind of representative downtown scene to like really in kind of dangerous areas in the bars. I put all these inflatables because we were discussing yesterday a lot. Maybe you get bored about this as a possibility, maybe also to be used. And this is just a smaller scale thing, which is we built for some events in Madrid. This is actually a bike which has just this ventilator, and so it's a very small thing. It's this idea to be totally autonomous, but to be honest, you also need some extra things. But the idea was that you go with your bike and then you have this kind of guerrilla space, and you can just, without even asking for permission, just do it almost everywhere. It's also, if you use a wide lens, it looks quite big. So. In that last, yeah, that last one was a conference actually in a place called Casa Entendida, and it was like in this neighborhood there were a lot of different lefty activities, initiatives, and they were discussing of how can this something in between squatting and like working in public space be more established, because we also did a temporary garden in Madrid where we squatted empty lot, and this was a kind of successful project. So this was kind of a following up thing. So it was a conference about occupying public space, more or less. Is that an answer? So this is another project which is slightly different.
Yeah, it's still a mobile activator, but yeah, maybe in a different strategy. This is a project we did in Nantes last summer for this festival called Voyage à Nantes. It was nice because we were there for 2 weeks at the School of Art, building with the students and developing this project with them. And yeah, these first ideas came from these drawings by John Heiduck, these kind of poetic sketches that he was very good at making, and this led into some ideas of maybe creating some mobile monuments, some mobile objects that we could then do a small kind of procession around the city. Actually, this word procession was they didn't let us use it, so that was cut off straight away in the first weeks, and we turned into something else. So we started developing really fast these kind of surreal ideas of what these mobile objects could be, and how we could place them in public space. And the story, I mean, because during these 2 weeks it was sort of like an art camp. We were living there, eating there together, discussing a lot, and these objects started turning into this narrative of the Trojan horse, that this art can come into a space and kind of invade it in a positive sense or negative, depending on interpretations. We started developing maps of the paths that we could take and specific points where we could stop with these objects and kind of create a little moment there. And this is already during the day, and so it was very choreographed, these movements, and we were all dressed in these gray working suits, and we were going very slowly. It had this very solemn rhythm to it, so on the edge of dark, strange, feeling to it. And you can see, so the one on the left is kind of like a U-boat. It has a periscope on it, but which is turned around, so what you see is upside down. Then it's a cannon, but which shoots confetti. And then there's this obelisk, clear, and then there's a movable wall, then the kind of Trojan horse object, and then this monument to a monument, which is just the base of a monument. So here, some pictures. So this was 2 weeks leading up to one day of us going around the city, 3 times actually, so one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one at night. This is the confetti shooting.
So is this, I mean, it's some kind also of process where it's a discussion a bit also with ourselves, if architecture can also be just something which happens for a moment, and that such a monument creates a certain kind of memory, and then can be gone again, or maybe, so that is very different, I think, from many other projects which also always solve a problem or have some kind of social agenda. This was really trying to use just like purely playful, poetic kind of things, and also attack the city bit, but not in a very aggressive way.
Yeah. And the base of this monument had smoke coming out. Not sure how many pictures we have. Okay. Yeah, people were. Yeah, it was mixed reactions. Yeah, this starts to be the highlight. So actually the Trojan horse also had a bubble on it. So it's super hard to move, very difficult. And at one spot we attached it to Lafayette Galleries and inflated it through the doors as a quick attack on Lafayette. But which was actually surprisingly, they reacted really well to it. Somehow it brought a lot of attention to their shop. And you could go in, but it's this Klein bottle. You would go in, you would be outside, not in Lafayette, actually. So these are pictures of other places where we inflated the bubble. It's a very strong experience to be in one of these things. You get very primal feelings of, being in a very organic space. I don't know if it has to do with the womb or it's a very special, the sound, the way sound works. This, again. Oh, this is the video.
This is the periscope.
This is filming, through the periscope. One is maybe the confetti will shoot. Yeah, so I think we're getting close to the end. Yeah, so it's this action, this, like Jan said, close to performance, where what stays is the memory and how the people perceived it, and yeah.
There's questions. Hold on. Yeah, this is like moving forward to a little bit of a bigger scale. We call it town planning bottom up, and it's a project which is a long time ago, which maybe was a bit connected to the start where Raumlabor became working more professionally. And it started in a town called Halle Neustadt, which is a new town. I think it was actually inspired by the new towns around Stockholm. It was really in the 70s when the DDR had a really good time. They kind of had economy, and so they were very optimistic, and they were building this new town for the chemical industry. And they were building it in opposition to the old town of Halle, which is a medieval city in this place, which was It was actually a mud before, and now they have the technology to dry it out. So there was a whole kind of the socialist new town, and with this classical kind of modernist layout of all these like slices of houses, and then the center with some shopping and the cinema and some towers. And it was built like very fast, and many young families moved there. It was a privilege to get like apartment there, and so it was a very optimistic start. But at the same time, it was a very kind of one-liner kind of architecture. So what they did is it's also an image which is I think which is important to understand. I think there's maybe also a connection a bit to some part of Gothenburg's history, is that everything was more or less kind of organized around the work, around the factory, and like also the shopping and the spare time, like all the sport activities, the kindergarten, everything was kind of, so life was very, very much like directed also by this life-work connection, very different from what it is now. And they created at this time, they wanted to go really fast with the building of apartments, so they created this type which is called the B72, and they built 36,000 apartments of exactly the same time, so more than 90% of this whole city with 100,000 people were exactly the same apartment, which looked like this, and really not bad. I mean, very efficient, kind of small for a family, but also with some ideas to it. But it also had a very kind of fixed idea of how one should live and furnish and be and behave within society. Which then, after the wall came down and reunification of Germany, and after also this chemical industry had been shrinking a lot, it was actually sold, I think, to France and to the Americans, and it's still going on, but they found out that they only need a tenth part of the employers they had before, which also said a lot about economy in the DDR. So all these people got, or many of these people got unemployed, and so this became a kind of place of depression where everybody left. So within this, how the main public space looks today, also some kind of appropriation of these spaces. But here you see, like within some more than 10 years, the population shrank almost to half. And so when we started to work there, we were asked to make a city development concept, like a town planning concept, but the other way around, from big to small. So we were going to do a plan how this city could shrink in a kind of whatever social or aesthetical or whatever way, and we discussed a lot of possibilities. And first thing what we did is we moved to Halle Neustadt, or we rented an apartment there, or there were many free apartments, so we could just get an apartment. We didn't have to rent it. And then we found out that being in that space, it was very much different. Like in the beginning, we were very shocked by all the high rises and by how harsh this kind of architecture is. But after like 3 weeks of talking to people, just having coffees there, like everyday shopping, we were much more concerned with the public transportation, and we felt like we lived just in a very green neighborhood, which is very close to the city center, which is only like 2 kilometers away, and in a kind of comfortable but high-rise surrounding. But then two different things became important for us, and we tend to do maps, we can call them potential maps of many of these places where we work in kind of town planning or research context. And this is very hard to read, but it's really like we were doing all these interviews, and we all had our notebooks, and also had some films, and then we were trying to put this all together in one map. So combine this very rational kind of architecture view on the city with a very subjective, up-to-date view of what actually happens in that city, and where you have potentials, where you have shops, where you have terrible bars, where you have some people who are really engaged and have this historical club and sports activities and all this. And this became kind of the foundation of a plan that we made, which tried to make this whole city more individual. We said that it's since, I mean, the socialist time is over, also the city, if it wants to survive, somehow has to become more diverse and offer more different spaces and more. So and also some places are just going to disappear into something new, and some other places going to survive. And we also set some monuments, and we said, okay, some places for the identity of such a city should rather stay, even so we didn't want to protect them we didn't want to make them into like historical monuments, but we proposed to leave them, and then we made different scenarios for, you know, like this kind of forest city that becomes very loose, and all the large buildings go away, and then this idea that everybody has this private garden next to his house, and also some more like advanced idea that we have a toll-free zone where everybody can trade with whatever, and there's no taxes anymore, which was at this time actually not so unrealistic. I mean, this was not that kind of crisis that we talk about right now. That was really like, they were mostly, the ones who left were the young and strong, and the ones who stayed were mostly very problematic families. So from there we developed a whole kind of big set of tools which we thought could apply to different parts in that city to make it more diverse. To that in the end the city becomes something different, something, I mean, at this point hard to mention, but it actually happened a little bit that way, even though this plan was never really executed because there was not really power, because under the conditions of shrinking there's not much power the state has. You can just subsidize different things, but there's no investor coming and ask you what he wants to do. But it's really like the state is in a week. So it more or less happened, I think, in a kind of evolutional way, the same. And one way I show this is mostly to show that one key thing of this town planning strategic plan, which was much more images, plans and papers, was that we said we have to start somewhere. We have to have this activity knots. And this city is there's still 50,000 people living there. We can't like keep this kind of mood, this terrible kind of atmosphere of kind of decaying and going away. We can't leave that, but we have to start somewhere. We have to concentrate some of this governmental money to some places. And in the next year, we had actually, we got in contact with local theater, which was obviously not in Neustadt, but in the Altstadt, in the old town. And they always did a theater festival every second year, and so they were going to do a theater festival again. And they wanted to involve us, and we kind of convinced them, since we were these Neustadt guys, that they should do it in Neustadt. It was first like a terrible reaction, but then they also had to renovate their house, which was really good for us. And they had difficulties finding a place directly. They found an old shopping mall. So yeah, they agreed, and it became a project, like a real project, which just started. This just to give you an overview. So the old city has all of these, like their festivals, their cinemas, and Neustadt has nothing. And the space that we occupied was an old student dormitory with about 1,000 rooms. And it was closed, I think, already for 7 years or 8 years when we approached that place. And it was right in the city center. This was one of these kind of monumental. And I think this kind of slides, big slides of modernist planning, it's actually a copy from a plan somewhere near to Stockholm. And so the way we tried to do this was that we wanted to bring the theater festival to Halle Neustadt, and at the same time we had this idea to make it a hotel, so to make the whole structure, to use this old building to call this festival, let's say we first build a hotel and then the hotel becomes a theater somehow. And in the same time we wanted to do this with the young unemployed and kind of people from this neighborhood, because this was more our aim than to do something with the building. It was not about the architecture, but about the kind of change, notion of change. So we have these three buildings, two buildings, the old station and this high-rise, right next to this new built shopping mall. And what happened was that after a long period where we had really difficulties to reach these young guys, two of my partners who had lived there in Neustadt, and for 1 year, they started to make rap battles because they happened to see, when they were really desperate, thinking they can never kind of connect to this neighborhood, they went to see the movie 8 Miles, and they found out about this new kind of battling thing, and so they started, so maybe we try this is our last try before we leave this sinking boat. And then suddenly they were really getting popular, and so they got in contact, and so the hotel was then built by 80 of these kids mostly in the summer holidays. They built like 80 rooms, and then different artists from all over the world came and occupied these different spaces in the building. And then the audience, they could either live in that hotel. It was also 80 rooms, which were all the time booked out, also because this was a very important space for many people who had lived in that student dormitory before, and then they started to come back and to spend another night. Many of them got found their wives and men in that kind of space. The space was like the place where I was in, was the festival center. This is why the whole story comes now to the festival center, which was the old espresso bar, and while we were developing this project on a very kind of low budget, because it was a small festival, we found that there's all these doors from the demolished building, and they're kind of a perfect building material because it was DDR prefabrication, so they were exactly 100% the same. So we could easily, we had nothing, but we could easily find 1,000 doors because every building had many of these doors. So I think, and then we found some kind of design how we can make from doors furniture.
Built for the workers of the nearby chemical industry. The housing blocks are like abstract patterns. Looking around, I see trees and greenery everywhere. There are hardly any curtains left in the windows across the street. Across from the new shopping mall, there's a vacant block 18 stories high. It used to be a student's dormitory. Lately, there are lots of young people around again. They're running a temporary hotel in the building now. It's part of a theater festival. They even reopened this old espresso bar. We used to meet here when we were students. Instead of chairs, they've built strange benches from old doors with fake wood graining. And the coffee is a lot better today. Most of the buildings here are very large. In order to keep the mass production cheap, there isn't much variation in the houses. People like me who have lived here for years don't mind that at all. Neustadt has around 37,000 apartments, most of which are totally identical. Mine has 6 doors. There are about 72 apartments in the building. That makes a total of 432 doors per building. Usually not much happens on Untitled Chapter. People just cross it to get to the mall. When I first moved here, thousands of workers used to take the train from here to get to the chemical plants. Now everybody goes by car or takes the new tram line. My son also got one of these new trail bikes. He and his friends ride around on them all day, only they don't ride, they jump and twist their way over the playgrounds. The streets have these curves in Neustadt. There's no obvious system to their layout. As a stranger, it can be hard to find your way around.
Okay, stop this here. This is a second bigger project, which is in a kind of similar but very different cultural context. It's called Open House, and it's located in Anyang, which is not far from Seoul, but Seoul in Korea, and it also became a very big industrial city within 20 years. It grew from, I don't know exactly, but I think from like 10,000, 15,000 people to, I think, 2.5 million. And this kind of turbo modernization or industrialization caused that it went to two phases, very fast phases of settling, of urbanization, and here in this part where we were working, they were both still existing. I mean, this was this block structure which had shops and it's a bit like the European city. I mean, it has shops and commercial activities on the ground floor, small streets, like and then 4 to 6 floors of housing. And this only existed for about 10 to 15 years, and then it was replaced by these high-rise buildings, just to get more density, and also because they have this kind of rent and buy system in Korea, which allows them to do kind of constant investment. So part of their economy is also artificially kind of run by this this real big real estate business, where we might also have some similarities to Gothenburg. I don't know. So this is a totally kind of first generation immigrant city. I mean, immigrants not from the outside, but from the rural areas. So what we did there was a bit similar to what we did in Neustadt, but with a kind of mixed team of 4 people from our office being there for 3 months, and then a team of Korean architects and sociologists helping us, and students. And we also did a kind of research, and we did kind of this kind of potential plan, first to find out what is really happening in that neighborhood and what could be approached to do some kind of intervention. And we were invited by this art festival, which is called the Anyang Art Project, and they wanted really to go into public space this time. Before, they were more like the Münster Art Project, where they have more like a sculptural, like sculptures in public space also. And what this group found out was that there was a really big desire to grow things, because this was probably because they were like first generation coming from villages, very small villages. So there's wherever, like you maybe have in Germany, you have flowers, they were all like growing cabbage and tomatoes and stuff, and on every roof of garages and also on the sidewalks. And so this became kind of a big part of this project, became this kind of gardening project out of this observation. But there were many other observations done, and many other programs came up, and what we found out, in difference to our kind of European culture in terms of spending spending time together, was that it was very specialized. That they have all these bangs, they call it, like room is bang, and so they have a video bang, and they have a sauna bang, and they have a karaoke bang, and they usually go to these places which mostly are concentrated on the street or in a neighborhood, and so they go there and then they gather there, also because they mostly have kind of small apartments, and they're not so easy inviting someone over, so they meet in these places and then they do something special, which is not always like combined with drinking or something. It's really like very specified. And so our And we did a second map here, which we called the desire map, which was more about the, like the positives, the desires, what people wanted to do. What in all the interviews we did, we tried to illustrate that in a map, what their kind of vision was, what they liked, what kind of events they liked. And we did that in a section. I hope it's very small. So the actual kind of participative project started in this creek, which you saw before, I think, on the map, that there was this river kind of dry in the summer and with lots of water in the winter, which was a park, which was basically the sports and leisure park of this city, the only park. And after a long kind of negotiation with the festival and the city, they decided that we could use this park to build some kind of structure. So we started at the schools, planting different fruits and vegetables with the kids. And then we had these transportation bikes and this kind of ceremonies. We brought them to the site. And first there was no building at all. It started kind of as a garden. But they were already involved and they were taking part. And then the second thing we started was this call for building workshop to build this bang bang, like the room, a big structure which should incorporate kind of a European concept of a communal center into that garden. And the building was done in different workshops, mostly with kids, but also with local carpenters. There were also some people paid, but they were all like from the neighborhood. And I think you can see it already. The participation in that Asian city was just enormous. I mean, it was just very disciplined and nice, and they would come whenever, like, there were agreements, and it worked very, very well. But in contrast, all the work we had to do with the administration in the city was very difficult. There was a very difficult culture of how you handled things, and it was very hierarchical for us, also a bit difficult to handle. So that it was a very difficult project in the end. It was a bit maybe lost in translation, that we really didn't know how to behave to get somewhere, not with the people on the street, but crane onto this steel structure. So it became this kind of vertical garden, exhibition house, tea house, house for rabbits, many different programs on one spot. And the architecture turned out very differently because the building company just didn't think that it was very important to look at our plans. They just had a different concept. I don't know. We never found out that it's always neat. So you have a small tour now, because this is a rabbit house, and you go up, and this is kind of a tea pavilion. Also the furniture is created by the people. And an exhibition space which was used by some other artists who were involved in the project as an exhibition space, that still exists. And then the greenhouse, so it gives you a good impression. This was two kind of long-term, bigger projects. This is something which is still going on, or is just kind of finished. This project we did in a suburb of Torino, and this really has a bit of a different approach. It's really trying to activate a place just with the people, just by going there. And here we have, it's really a suburban condition. We have this neighborhood where you see it could also be Sweden or Germany, where you have this, it was a socialist government at that time, and they wanted to do good for their people, and they had feared the car industry, so they had a lot of employment. So a lot of foreigners, it was a rival city basically. A lot of people from the south came to work in Fiat, and they built this neighborhood unit. It's what town planners call a neighborhood unit, where you have a school, you have a certain amount of apartments, and you have, normally you have a supermarket or some kind of commercial center, and this was this building. But the problem was that the supermarket had its own kind of commercial logic, so they never moved in there, because I think they just saw that this is a dead-end road, and I think they just saw this is not attractive enough. So this created a kind of conflict. You see here this beautiful architecture, it's arcades, so kind of a terrible dumb building which I never got in use, and which also there was a bakery and a butcher shop there, which then also never succeeded and was closed again. So when we came there, there was only a center for elderly people, like education of elderly people in that building, and the rest was empty. But right next to it, there was this kiosk, which we never found out how it got there, but this became kind of the social center of this whole neighborhood and kind of replaced the, It's basically in Italian. I give you a bit of explanation while the movie is running. What we did here is we just the whole thing was invited by a collective of curators who get very much involved also in the project. So they were very active, and they also invited some anthropologists to help us doing this workshop in the suburbs. So when we arrived, the whole people there were already informed about that we were raumlabor and that we were coming, and that we asked them to collect some, because it was again on a kind of art budget, very small budget. We asked them to collect a lot of like all building material. We asked them for all doors, but then they found all the windows. So when we arrived first day, we just said, okay, we call this place now Cantiere Barca. And Cantiere means in the same time workshop and construction site. And this was really just, we wanted to first build these big sites so that everybody learns about the tools and learns about the possibilities before we even discuss what we were going to do. And then we declare this kind of notion of change, that now it's changing. And then we separated in different groups. We were, I think, 7 people from raumlabor and some friends also who helped. And we had like 35 people from the neighborhood who were working, so it was kind of a chaotic kind of thing where everybody was trying to do different things. And it was very clear from the beginning that they wanted to have some platforms, some stages, some more connection between this kiosk where everything was happening and this building which was mostly out of use. And then there was also the group where I was working in. We did this strange kind of house because we felt like it's strange just to use this space which is so dull and not to do something like big and new, like kind of a sign. We just wanted to make something playful, a sign that this is now different. And so we built this strange house which is basically just for kids, to like a hideaway where they can go in and look out. And yeah, so this is already, I think, Friday, and Saturday we had invited everybody for a big party. Friday night we got a bit of panic. yeah, you might see that already in the movie. That was a very touching moment after 6 days, and we were also surprised how much we did, but we were most surprised that there were suddenly like 300 people. We hadn't seen them before, like they just came because the party, they really have this ability to party, you know, this neighborhood. It was like, they were all like, whenever I talked to someone, his brother was in jail, or like, it was everything there, what happens there is very informal, but you don't feel it so much. And there's this connection of Americans and Southern Italians, and I don't know what kind of businesses they do. But everything is like very relaxed and very friendly. And luckily for this party, there was also the cultural mayor of Torino was coming to give a speech, and then she was also very involved. And she promised us that she's going to declare the piece as an art piece like art in public space. And then now they have to maintain it for at least 15 years. So we also got some more funding, and we went back there now for 3 more workshops, and we built in these 2 former bakery and butcher space. We built kind of a small social center together with some people from the neighborhood and also some students who more and more came to the workshops we did. So I can show you a bit. And this is also something I was going to show you, because I also thought about this could also happen as a festival center, that we just do something, we build something and maybe never finish it, but it's also, I think, a very interesting thing that you start to do things again yourself and in public space, or like some kind of between education and emancipation kind of thing. And just to show you a bit about the strategies of participation, we very often do the sketchbooks where we kind of make clear that we've been to the site before and that we have certain preoccupation and that we are specialists, but in the same time that we don't know exactly what we're going to do. And then we have like the first 3-4 pages are with our drawings and explanations, and then it's just empty and everybody gets a sketchbook. So if we would start now a workshop, you would all get a sketchbook, and then you would also be responsible to present your ideas every night or like every second night. So this is about like what I was saying before of how can you create some kind of participation, but that is also creative and it's not only like asking questions nobody can answer. It's just some more images of the demo process. Yeah, I think I go over this now. Just to give an impression. Maybe you want to ask some question. Are you still okay? Are you still on the floor? There's a gentleman asking a question.
I love your work, but at 7:30 I have to leave, and I want to hear how you see our city and what you think can be done here.
Okay, yeah, I think we can manage that. We can manage.
But take a cup of coffee.
Yeah, maybe I show 2 more projects, and then we get into the discussion. So we can also. Okay, this I go through very quick. It's just another aspect of what we just seen, and I wanted to put it because it's more in this kind of production direction, and it's also trying to make people who are not so much involved in the process to involve them actively in the city. And the idea is a city called Saint-Nazaire. It's also a harbor city in South France, in the Bretagne, where they built this big ship, like still build this big cruising boats, like the Queen Mary 2 was built here, so it's a very also famous place. So they have a good economy, they have a lot of public spaces, and there also when we were there we had the feeling that it's all very well maintained, but it's not so many people, or it's not really usable. It's all kind of design, but it's not really happening. So we were trying to do something which is more active, which fills this gap, and this was the museum where we were invited to have an exhibition actually. And the idea we came up with was that we offered to build mobile benches, so that they had a lot of benches in that city, but they were also isolated, and we thought that they were not used because they were isolated. So we wanted to have kind of an adapted tool to these benches so that you can make some kind of social space. And the strategy was that we have this map on the wall, and that people who come to the exhibition, they can discuss where they want to put a bench, and then they put a sign there. And then we have prefabricated elements for these benches. Then we have an instruction on the wall, so this was all left by itself, so people just had to learn how to do it. And then there was mostly it was school classes or like two families gathering together. It was also becoming a very social thing because you couldn't really do it yourself, and it took about 2 hours. Then they built these benches. Then they bring it into the city, and this was also documented by the museum. There's a whole book on this, and it created this kind of temporary community, also bench builders, which were really proud of the benches. Especially the kids. And this could also be kind of an idea of that you do something which then becomes spread in the cities. For me, could also be a festival center. We also did a dinner where we bring all the benches together, and I would explain a bit more about our work. I think we maybe stop here, and we start the discussion, because this is another aspect of this. Maybe we play it while we discuss.
I think we'll start by saying thank you for the presentation.